They say never meet your heroes. Maybe we should have no heroes except for the perfect one that came here that you and I may know eternal life and be redeemed of our sins. Perhaps we shouldn't revere comedians and actors and musicians and such, but I don't know, it's difficult not to get caught up in it. One of my heroes is Larry David. I absolutely love him. But Larry David's come out and criticised Bill Maher for having that dinner with Trump, writing a piece called My Dinner with Adolf. Let's have a look at it because I'm excited about that, because look, for me, like, Bill Maher is not the sort of avatar of where we all ought to land politically. Bill Maher, for me, shows the journey of left-wing anti-establishmentism. He presumably was a peer of Bill Hicks et al., an outspoken and political comic, got his own show on HBO that was critical of government, presumably when there were right-wing governments in, and somewhat critical, but I bet less so when it was your Clintons and your Obamas. Bill Maher's been a part of the establishment for a long time. He's a kind of an establishment, anti-establishment voice. I've met him. He's a really, really lovely, brilliant bloke. I like Bill Maher a great deal. But Larry David attacking him, I think, is more interesting yet, because it makes me wonder what that establishment, of which I was briefly a part, believes when it comes to Donald Trump. I see the what I would regard as somewhat hysterical social justice movements and protests. I see that. I see the Tesla attacks and all of that. But I wonder how it is right there in Hollywood. And I reckon Larry David would be a good way of understanding it and diagnosing it, because he's, I suppose, part of that, part of that establishment. So let's have a look at that article now. Here's Variety commenting on it. Let's get into it. So it's Larry David's writing. I like Larry David. Let me know what you think about him in the comments and chat. Imagine my surprise when in the spring of 1939, a letter arrived at my house inviting me to dinner at the old chancellery with the world's most reviled man, Adolf Hitler. I'd been a vocal critic of his on the radio from the beginning, pretty much predicting everything he was going to do on the road to dictatorship. No one I knew encouraged me to go, he's Hitler, he's a monster. But eventually I concluded that hate gets us nowhere. I knew I couldn't change his views, but we need to talk to the other side, even if it has invaded and annexed other countries and committed unspeakable crimes against humanity. So the premise of the jokes is Larry David, who is a comic genius, let's have it right, is to conflate Trump with Hitler, which is a common trope, isn't it? It's the most common trope, other than he's orange or whatever. It's the trope is he's like Hitler. Now, Larry David is, I guess, a sort of, you'd say, a secular Jew. I don't feel like he's a super religious guy. He's a kind of New York cultural comedic Jew, perhaps best summarized by a joke I bet he wrote, that when in that episode of Seinfeld, Jerry Seinfeld's dentist, played by your man who goes on to be Breaking Bad, like when the dentist Watley becomes a Jew, Jerry Seinfeld goes, I think he's become a Jew just for the jokes, because he tells a bunch of Jewish jokes, this guy. And the rabbi says to Jerry Seinfeld, and does this offend you as a Jew? And Seinfeld says, no, it offends me as a comedian. And that's the position I think that Jerry Seinfeld, I'm assuming, and Larry David has, that their comedy is super important to them. They love it and they revere it. So you're in the hands now of a comic genius, whether you like him or not. But the device, Trump equals Hitler, is, I would say, a jaded device, but even a jaded device executed well can be brilliant. Let's have a look at it. Also, so it's sort of saying, imagine if Bill Maher went to visit Hitler, what would you say? Would you say that was the right thing to do? Here's an example from real life. Gandhi wrote to Hitler. Gandhi wrote and said, you are the only person who can probably prevent a war, man. Come and sort your shit out. And I reckon Gandhi was right to do that, actually. So even in the terms of the allegory, I would say that you should speak to Hitler. I knew I couldn't change his views, but we need to talk to the other side, even though he'd annexed other countries and committed unspeakable crimes against humanity. The fact is, though, that Trump hasn't done anything like that. He hasn't committed unspeakable crimes against humanity. In fact, the environment of politics has become so hostile, the wars, just take recent events. Obama's behaviour in 2008, after the crash, bailing out the banks. If he was the leader he'd claimed to be, Barack Obama, in 2008, he'd have supported the American people and would have gone, oh my God, this dude is like Eisenhower. He's standing up for the people instead of the banks. This is whoa. But that didn't happen. And that's what generated populism. And it was Steve Bannon that said, populism's the new politics now. And now some people go, populism, all leaders are popular. No, that's not true. Look at my country now. It's been run by Keir Starmer. No one likes Keir Starmer. He won a landslide election because he's the best of all the worst alternatives. That's the way they want politics viewed. You've got no options. You got, forgive the language, this cunt or this cunt. That's what they want. Now, what happened with Trump is something so anomalous and peculiar and yet so in a line with the culture emerged that it broke the game. It broke it. But the reason it broke the game is because the game is so rigged and so bad because Barack Obama, who could have been amazing, was not amazing. It fucked it. That's why. So the premise that the Democrats should look at primarily is we created Trump. That's even if you want to regard Trump negatively rather than Trump potentially as some kind of radical political genius who through tariffs is rebooting the American economy and creating new jobs, and through his unique style generating opportunity, and through his appointments of people like RFK is changing America in a fundamental way. I'm not having an opinion on Trump here. I'm criticising and analysing this joke. 2 weeks later, I found myself on the front steps of the old Chancellery. I like that you keep saying the old Chancellery because that's quite funny because, you know, like Hitler was the Chancellor, and I like the nomenclature, unlike I like Larry David's enjoyment of saying it, and was led to an opulent living room where a few of the Führer's most vocal supporters had gathered. That's pretty funny, vocal supporters, because look who they are. Himmler, Goering, Leni Riefenstahl, the brilliant filmmaker, the Duke of Windsor, sorry about that, formerly King Edward VIII, because the British king was kind of pals with Hitler. He abdicated because he wanted to marry an American woman, actually. We talked about some of the beautiful art on the walls that had been taken from the homes of Jews, but our conversation ended abruptly when we heard loud footsteps coming down the hallway. Everyone stiffened as Hitler entered the room. Now, the thing is like making light of the sort of, art taken from the homes of Jews. Obviously, Hitler was... and Hitler's policies were monstrous, as best we understand, revisionist history aside. You've got to say that the death camps, the annihilation, the anti-Semitism was fundamentally and brutally wrong. But there is no equivalency of Trump persecuting minority groups comparable to the Holocaust, is there? Even if you are as anti-Trump as it's conceivable to be. That's not true, and there's no equivalent of ransacked art unless you wanted to get into the broader idea maybe of, well, you know, the White House was built by, like, yes, Scottish stonemasons, but also slaves. Is that right? So if you want to look at the corruption within American politics, it is not unique to or exemplified by Trump. It's inherent and institutional. So if you want to have that perspective, it is available to you, but you can't make it in particular about Trump. You have to look at what grew out of American politics and what is the nation founded on. Remember, I'm not judging you. I recognize that Britain's an imperialist, colonialist nation that exploited India, and that's just the way it went then. I don't know when we end the reckoning or how we review it, because, you know, as Theo Von has always been brilliant and articulate about, unless you're literally part of an elite, you're a victim also. If you're like me, from ordinary working class British background, or probably like you, ordinary American middle working class background, however you describe it, you are also a victim of the system. You can highlight that the experience of the American slave is worse than the experience of Appalachian hillbilly folk or other exploited groups. But now, look at the miasma we're in now. Meth addiction, poverty. These racial arguments now are historic arguments. And I would say, if you want to find equivalency of Hitler having Jewish art up in the Chancellery, you would have to look at the White House itself and how it was built and the conditions of its foundation. Would you? Let me know in the comments and chat.
According to Dr. John Lake, the world-renowned Beverly Hills beauty expert, most wrinkle fixes on the market are nothing but glorified moisturizers. Moisturizers, but glorified. Can you imagine? They hardly make a dent on your appearance, and some could even be harmful, he said. That's why he wants to take your attention away from mainstream cosmetic practices and draw you towards this extraordinary new product. There's a 2-minute video that we want you to watch. It's a viral video that's had millions of views and much positive feedback that alludes to, draws attention to, and helps us to analyze and scrutinize a new wrinkle cream that's powerful and effective. So to learn more about this extraordinary new product that's being called Photoshop for your face and better than any other moisturizer, go right now to bhmd1.com/brand or click the link in the description below. That's bhmd1.com/brand. Click on the link in the description below. Surely all of us want to embalm the cadaver before we even die and look glorious while we're still here on this bandwidth.
He was wearing a tan suit with a swastika armband and gave me an enthusiastic greeting that caught me off guard. Frankly, it was a warmer greeting than I normally get from my parents. That's good. And it was accompanied by a slap on my back. I found the whole thing quite disarming. I mean, like, as a comic device, saying going to meet Hitler, because I bet Hitler, like, on an interpersonal level, was all right. In fact, you see loads of documentaries about that. You know, he's got that dog, Blondie. I've got a German Shepherd. You know, if you weren't focused on the annihilation going on the Eastern Front and the Holocaust, the persecution, not only of Jews, but of gay people, disabled people, drug addicts, the mentally ill, if you were just like, oh, I can't think about that. Because in a way, we all do that now. You're not right now going, wait a minute, homeless veterans, that's not right. What can I do about it? Oh, yeah, you're just like, oh, yeah, I get it. There's a load of homeless veterans. It's wrong. It's disgusting. But, you know, what am I going to do? Or you're not thinking cobalt mines, are you, in Congo? You're not thinking about it right now. You know it's happening. Or child sex trafficking rings. You're not thinking about it, are you? So all of us are participating in a kind of sort of necessary absent-mindedness. So I do really like that bit. That's a very funny bit. Like, so, you know, imagine going to meet Hitler and then just sort of going, yeah, I quite like him. He's all right, really. He's sort of friendly. And, like, you know, and also, if you've seen someone, like, doing them Nuremberg rallies and Sieg Heiling around and everything, and then you meet him, it's mad, isn't it? Have you ever met really powerful people? It's a bit like, oh, well, what's happening? Like when I was once in a car with Tom Cruise, like, I'm not saying Tom Cruise is Hitler, obviously. I love Tom Cruise. Like, but I was like, oh, my God, this is mental. I mean, it's just there. I could just go, touch him. Tom Cruise. And then he actually did go, help me, help you. And I was like, fucking hell, this is too much. Can't even handle it. I joked that I was surprised to see him in a tan suit because if he wore that out, he'd be perceived as unführer-like. That amused him no end. I realised I'd never seen him laugh before. Suddenly he seemed so human. Here I was prepared to meet Hitler, the one I'd seen and heard, the public Hitler. But this private Hitler was a completely different animal. And oddly enough, this one seemed more authentic, like this was the real Hitler. The whole thing had my head spinning. But Trump isn't Hitler. The point of Hitler, as is continually alluded to in this piece, and particularly if you're a Jew, is the Holocaust, the persecution and execution of the Jews. Like, so if you imagine Hitler didn't do that. Well, what's he now? If you extract the Holocaust from Hitler, then what have you got? You've just got actually a pretty great guy. You know, like, do you know what I mean? It's like that. You can't extract that from it. But in order to make the comparison between Trump and Hitler, populist, you know, oh, is he a misogynist? You said the grab him by the pussy stuff, all of that. In order to make the comparison, you have to extract the defining attribute that made Hitler evil, the anti-Semitism. Unless you are an anti-Semite, then that's probably your favourite thing about him. Then this whole joke won't work on any level for you. He said he was starving and led us into the dining room where he gestured for me to sit next to him. I enjoy the joke of personifying Hitler because, like, if you've read about Hitler, as I have, it's pretty mad because he was like just a guy on some level. It's just too weird that all of that happened. You know, like he was a struggling artist in Vienna. He was homeless for a while. He was somewhat brave in the First World War, decorated officer. Like, I mean, again, when you extract the Holocaust, it's almost inconceivable that happened. And as has often been said, it's necessary to bake in all of the cultural and historic conditions. Otherwise, it's like, well, this guy must have been some kind of antichrist. And then when you start learning about the Nazis and UFOs and occultism, oh my God, then it gets crazy. But I like this joke. I like the joke because it's a funny joke to imagine going around Hitler's house and, you know, it's funny. It's a funny thing to do. But what I would say as a political piece, in order to compare Trump to Hitler, if you don't acknowledge that Trump's not doing genocides, then you're fucked. And in order to make an equivalency between Hitler's sort of broader evil and the evil of American power, you'd have to get into Middle Eastern wars, the genocides of the Native American people, slavery, all of the evil that has to be and has been committed in order to build this incredible and great country that I love. Then you've sort of got something more complex and it's not really to do with Trump anymore. Do you know what I mean? So that's how I see it. Goring immediately grabbed a slice of pumpernickel, whereupon Hitler turned to me and gave me an eye roll, then whispered, "Watch, he'll be done with his entire meal before you've taken 2 bites." That one really got me. Goring, with his mouth full, asked what was so funny, and Hitler said, "I was just telling him about the time my dog had diarrhea in the Reichstag." Goring remembered. How could he forget? He loved that story, especially the part where Hitler shot the dog before it got back into the car. Then a beaming Hitler said, "Hey, if I can kill Jews, gypsies and homosexuals, I can certainly kill a dog." That perhaps got the biggest laugh of the night, and believe me, there were plenty. Hitler would never kill a dog. He loved dogs. He loved Blondie. He was a vegetarian. There's just no way. Indeed, he looked into less cruel ways to boil lobster, and which I always thought was kind of, one of the many contradictions that contributes to the fascination in Hitler. But it wasn't just a one-way street with a Führer dominating the conversation. He was quite inquisitive and asked me a lot of questions about myself. I told him I'd just gone through a brutal breakup with my girlfriend because every time I went someplace without her, she was always insistent that I tell her everything I talked about. That's good. Because, imagine now you're just into, chatting about normal stuff with Hitler. I can't stand having to remember every detail of every conversation. Hitler said he could relate. He hated that too. What am I, a secretary? He advised me it's best not to have any more contact with her or else I'll be right back where I started and eventually I'd have to go through the whole thing all over again. That's brilliant. That's sort of comedically brilliant because Larry David is inserted into this piece that's designed to draw your attention to the fact that in his view, going to meet Trump is like going to meet Hitler, and if you met Hitler, it'll be there'd be aspects to it that'd be enjoyable. And then he's sort of found a really good example because what Larry David would have done there is he would have found something that genuinely annoys him, like having to tell someone, don't you hate that when your wife goes, what did you talk about? And I'm like, I'm much better when I tell mates stuff as well. When I tell my mates, I'm good at telling stories actually, but some's my wife. I don't know if she's not listening properly or something. I find it really hard. She goes, right, tell me everything, tell me every detail, and I feel like I get all I can't think of all of the I can't do it properly. But when I'm say with this lot that I work with on my mate Joe, I go right, because what it is then I can think of what is the mood that I'm trying to convey in this story, what is the essence of it, and what details are required in order to convey that essence. So anyway, I love that. That's a very funny thing for someone to break up with, and then it's very funny to imagine Hitler giving you really good advice. That's what's funny, is that's the actual advice that you should give someone who's going through a breakup. Don't contact or you'll be right back where you started. So imagine Hitler taking the time to do it. Well, in my opinion, it's best to pull off the Band-Aid, this relationship is codependent and I don't think you could return to it. Like Hitler, of course, was going out of his niece, wasn't he? He was doing all sorts of crazy shit. Well, he seemed obsessed with his niece. I said, it must be easy for a dictator to go for a breakup. He said, you'd be surprised, there are still feelings. There are still feelings. That really resonated with me. We're not that different after all, I thought. That if only the world could see this side of him, people might have a completely different opinion. 2 hours later, the dinner was over and the Führer escorted me to the door. I'm so glad to have met you. I hope I'm no longer the monster you thought I was. I must say, mein Führer, I'm so thankful I came. Although we disagree on many issues, it doesn't mean that we have to hate each other. And with that, I gave him a Nazi salute and walked out into the night. I would say that's really funny in loads of places, that Larry David's an amazing comedian. And I feel like, actually now that I think about it, a comedian's not a social scientist, although there is social science in what a comedian does. That's why when Dave Chappelle was marching into the trans issues, and look at where we are now, that's all changed, the whole culture. Dave Chappelle stayed on his line. Hold on a minute, there's stuff that's funny about this. No, I'm not having it. And now he's been rewarded, well, not rewarded, but the culture has come to where Dave Chappelle was. Now, see Larry David, he's got a partisan perspective that's understandable because all of us have partisan perspectives and we're allowed to like one political party more than another political party. That's just the way it is. My personal opinion is, leave it all to Jesus, leave it all to God. That stuff's managerial, break down centralised power wherever possible. But Larry David is I like the Democrats and I don't think Bill Maher should have done that. That's what he's saying. And what would it be? But maybe he is only purely doing it for a laugh and has no other consideration other than, that's pretty funny. I think that Larry David is doing an ingenious job as a comic there, and you just have to enjoy comedians for their comedy in the same way as you go enjoy footballers for their football and artists for their art. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments and the chat.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see more uncensored content where free speech can flourish, join our live stream. Click the link right here to watch the next video if you want to, or become a member of a growing movement. Download the Rumble app and you'll be informed every time we make a new piece of content. Stay free.